Home, the gold.
He could be too far. No, he's kicking. Oh, what a catch!
Puts a spicy forehand out in front of Naomi Morcilla.
Wu for the win. Team Canada. Darren Wu!
Santos with the layout grab.
Oh, that fantastic grab. The claws of Chaffer.
Canada just became the world champions.
Canada and the rest of the world. You're listening to the Huckin podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Theo from Toronto, Ontario.
And I'm Danie Proby from Vancouver, BC, and we are your coast-to-coast guide to all things Canadian Ultimate. So, speaking of Canadian Ultimate, we are talking about the quintessential UCI, or the Ultimate Canada Invitational, on the episode today. So, there's lots of news to get to. We have two awesome guests. But before we dive into any of that stuff, Theo, you played some Frisbee this weekend.
I played a tournament in Guelph. It used to be called Rust, but I think this year it was called Knock Off the Rust. And normally this tournament, you have to have like an average age of, I don't remember the exact number. It could be 31, it could be 33, I don't know. But basically all the members of your team combined need to average a certain age. So you could have like a 20-year-old, but then you're going to need to balance it with like a Grandmasters player, So you got to figure that out a little bit. So this year there's no requirements. I just picked up with a couple of friends that I played with before on Maverick, and honestly, it was pretty sweet time. I'm not gonna lie, like just playing. I know it's like a fun tournament, but it was fun to just be a part of that. Now that won't be playing at UCI or anything like that, so more covering it,
Did you say it was called Rust?
It's called Rust.
That's so funny.
The trophy is like a rusted thing too.
That's just good branding. I love to hear
good
that.
branding, Guelph Ultimate Players Association. By the players, for the players, and you see why right there. Some good branding. Yeah. So that's how I spent my Saturday. Did not play Sunday, but, that was my weekend of playing Frisbee. I think you played some Frisbee, but you delved into the different sports. They're playing a little volleyball. Is that right?
Yeah, so sometimes we do long weekend practices to try to build up to the volume and also the early mornings of tournaments that are coming up soon, where all these teams that we're playing against have been playing tournaments and we have not. So I took it as an opportunity to have that kind of 4-hour practice. And then I went straight to a volleyball tournament. So my team came third, I believe, in beach volleyball sixes. And that was for another 4 hours afterwards. So I could barely walk, but I got to eat a lot of food. So it was very, very exciting. And then today, at the time of recording this, so it's Sunday, we had the BC Prospect Camp for the U20s, and it was awesome. We had, I think, over 90 athletes on the field. We had probably 15, 16 volunteers out, like writing notes, taking little pieces of feedback, and I'm now trying to compile all of it, but everyone worked really hard. It was from 10 till 3, so the athletes got 5 hours of drills and feedback, and it was so fun because I feel like I was watching the players on the U20 girls side, and I feel like I've either coached 75% or more of them. So it was really cool to see them all out there.
Yeah, you're probably pretty tired from that. I'm not gonna lie. Just was it hot? Was it hot out there, like in the prospect camp, like beaming sun?
Yeah.
So you got a little color.
Yeah, I have a burn on my forearms.
Color today, so make sure you rest up.
Thanks.
Yeah, and because we're ready. Like this is something we've talked about before. We were talking about this, off air as well. Get ready for UCI. I'm getting ready for it. I'm ready for our first ever meeting, Danie. Like I'm just excited for it. We've never met in person, and we've been doing this for how long? Yeah, 4 months. We're gonna film it, so Huckin audience are gonna be able to see that. I'm gonna film it on my phone. She's gonna film it from her perspective with her thoughts, and she'll probably say this guy's shorter than I thought he was gonna be, and I'm probably gonna say this girl's taller than I thought she was gonna be. So I think that's what's actually gonna happen.
Yeah, we're going to hug, and I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to be going over your head, and I'll miss you.
We'll see. We'll see. But that's something to look forward to. But right now, we're going to jump into the news. We're, of course, start with the West Coast and get it going. So let's hit the news.
We now have breaking news.
Welcome to your news section. As always, I'm going to start with your West Coast. There was a scrimmage that happened with Red Flag, and some of the people that are going to be trying out for World Games from the West, and then they picked up some extra players from Traffic and Furious. So they kind of had a short roster. I think the World Games squad was maybe 14 or less people. And from what I heard, I don't know what the final score was, but I think at half it was like 7-4, something like that, World Games over Red Flag. So I asked for some more details, and they just said that the Red Flag team was making a lot of errors, or they just couldn't contain the deep strikes. So it's good for them to finally get tested and finally get reps. I'm sure that will pay off a lot for UCI. So really happy to hear that they actually had a good tight game. Is that what you were expecting out of that game there, Theo?
I mean, it's not the full World Game squad as you mentioned. Obviously, the squad hasn't been made yet, so it is obviously not going to be the squad. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Red Flag does. They're one of my teams. I mean, everyone's watching out for them, but they're one of Theo's personal teams that he's going to watch out for at UCI to do some damage. People in Ontario, they kind of know of Red Flag because they've seen the roster, but wait until you see them in person. I haven't seen them play personally, but Danie, you have, and you've hyped them up a little bit, I think, and people around Vancouver. So I'm excited to see what they can do. Excited.
Yeah, it's always fun to see teams that are relatively young because it can really go both ways. They can just make a lot of errors and kind of get in their own heads, or they can completely pop off and the energy can be overwhelming. So that's why they're exciting. You never really know what team is going to show up. But there was another scrimmage in Vancouver, I believe between TT and Fable, both teams a little bit more experience. And this time, a little birdie told you, somehow you got this news before I did, that Fable ended up beating TT. So those teams are neck and neck. They're both going to be going to UCI. So I'm curious to see how they're going to end up finishing. Like, I don't know how I'm going to be doing my brackets or my seeding based on what's even happening in Vancouver. I feel like I'm a little lost, to be honest.
Yeah, I was surprised, honestly, Danny, that I got the news before you, but it's because the little birdie that was in my year is from Toronto, but has been living in Van City for a little bit and is on the roster of Fable, and he was very excited to tell me that they had beaten TT, which I don't know if that happens quite often, to be honest. I'm not in that scene, so I don't know, but it sounds like you're shaking your head, so I'm probably not. So probably a big signature win, as they call it. I know it's a kind of like pre big tournament, but speaking of brackets there, Danie, I'm excited to actually do that, like in our predictions, starting with the Masters next week, where we can say like, okay, this is how I see Pool A finishing, Pool B, and then from there we're gonna pick our quarters, semis, finals. Oh, that is so fun! Come on.
Yeah, it's like we're a real sports podcast.
We've been real for 4 months.
That's what we're aiming
we've
for.
been real for 4 months, but this is like the real time now. This is like the big time.
Yeah. So in other news, like there's also the prospect camp. I already kind of talked about that in the get to know you part. Not much else to really say other than that. If you're listening to this and you were at that prospect camp, or even if you weren't at that prospect camp, try out, put your name forwards. It's a lot of the same drills. I saw a lot of smiling, happy faces leaving. A lot of people that I was talking to said that it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be, and everyone was really nice, and they made new friends, and they got a lot of really good feedback. So you wouldn't get as much feedback at a tryout, but putting yourself out there is such a good skill. Learning how to be afraid of something and still putting yourself into position is like flexing or working out your courage muscle. So if you're listening to this and you're a junior, try out. Nothing to lose. So that's how I feel about that. One thing before I let you take the reins for a little bit is I kind of want to make a correction from something that I had said last week.
I like that.
When we were talking about with Julia, and she was talking about her experiences coaching men as a female coach, and I mentioned something about John Hayduke and how he said to me, like, oh, you shouldn't have to like flex on people by throwing the disc really far or whatever, and how that had stuck with me. And I want to just kind of mention it because the reason why that stuck with me was not because, oh, he's this huge dude with piercing blue eyes and he's got a loud voice. Like, of course, he could say that from his privileged position. It more stuck with me because it challenged me to think of other ways to gain respect. I'm like, okay, body posture, whatever. Like, how can I be exuding confidence without using my words necessarily or like throwing a frisbee really far? So it made it it made it sound like I've been harboring this like resentment for years, and it's like exact opposite. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that on air to our Huckin A fans. So this next one is technically West, but it's your news. So do you want to dip into the West a little bit and kind of announce this next part?
I mean, are they really West? Are they more like Central at this point? I don't know, because I guess
they're counted as West in terms of Ultimate Canada.
True. You're West Manitoba. So Manitoba, their roster came out, and there was an interesting addition to the squad. Quinn Snyder, he's on the World Games applicant pool. He plays for General Strike, they could play for the Wind Chill as well in the AUDL. So big, tall presence. And you don't normally get a first-year player, at least he's listed as a rookie on the roster right now, as someone that steps onto their team. So I don't know, Manitoba, if you're listening out there. I believe their open and women's teams are planning to go, but once again, I could be corrected on that. So Manitoba, reach out to us and let us know. But I think both of those teams are going to be strong and something to watch out for. I know we talked Uni series last week, so that's why I'm bringing that up. Just a little bit of roster news. Why not? Let's talk about it. A tournament happened in Ontario. I mentioned last week about it. So Hound was there along with Grand Trunk, who we've heard from before with Chris Chan, Shrike, the B team in Ottawa, and then it was a Queens alumni and Local 613, which is the mixed team there. So some of the male identifying players from that team, they were on this team, and they kind of played round robin. Hound, you didn't make my prediction right the first time. We didn't predict this tournament, but you went 3-0, so congrats to you. Kingston players, you went 2-1. GT 1-2. Shrike, unfortunately 0-3, but according to Hound captain Jamie Millage, he said Shrike actually gave them their closest game. So you got to take those results as you will with that. So even though they went 0-3, they gave the team that won out the hardest game in terms of score. So take that what you will. Last week we had done our AUDL Canada Cup, and now that's over. So maybe you don't know the results, but I'll share it very briefly. Montreal taking the victory, beating Toronto. Danny, I suspect you didn't watch this game, so I'm just going to tell you real quick notes about it.
I did not.
I don't know, it's all good. Real quick notes about it. It was back and forth in terms of breaks, and just hearing the crowd from the, watching it from the computer, I was just like, I wish I could play in front of a huge crowd like that. It just seems like really cool and just really exhilarating. But there was a controversial stall call in the fourth quarter that resulted in Montreal getting the disc. And then eventually what happened was Kevin Quinlan, who's been on the podcast, I told him we need to get a picture with him and bomber Jeff Powell because, Montreal won. He throws a cross-field high-arcing hammer just out of the reach of the hands of Phil Turner to Malik Ojay-Samar for the score. And that's actually the winning goal because Toronto would end up turning it over and Montreal would just bleed out the clock. So pretty intense that you chose to go with a high-arching hammer for the victory. Kudos to you, Montreal. I'm really excited to see what they do at UCI. That's we're talking about picks here, Danny. Mephisto is going to be up there with my picks because they've been playing all together. That's basically Royale is Mephisto, Mephisto is Royale. So they're going to be polished, ready to go, very dangerous. And that's the results there. And then last thing I will say is Uni Series. Rosters are starting to come out. I saw Carleton's out there recently as well. I know Jeremy Hill is their coach now, so kudos to him for getting that. And I don't know if I'm going to say this first name properly. Carlos Bose? Do you know that last name there, Danny? Do you know if I'm saying it right?
I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but that's exactly how I would have pronounced it.
So I know he's an avid fan of the podcast. I spoke to him after a game one time, and he is coaching the B team. So thanks for building into the future generations of Ottawa Ultimate. I know he's involved in the juniors program as well. So love to see people giving back and growing the sport. And he's coaching the young players on Carleton B. And so kudos to you for doing that. I know you're an avid listener. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for helping the youth. And group chats have started. They're very, very quiet. So spice it up. Tell us get some trash talk going. Something. I don't know. join the group chat if you haven't. In terms of if you're a captain or coach, it's not open to everyone. You got to be a university captain or coach to kind of sign up your team account.
Sorry, Batch. You can't get into the group chat.
I don't know if he wants to get in that one, but that's all the news I have. So you can talk about Batch and our next guest as well.
So, for our main event, we're going to be breaking down all things UCI, maybe not schedule. We talk about schedule a little bit, but we won't be breaking down matchups or anything like that. But we're talking all things UCI with TL and Batch. And we also are going to be doing some throwbacks to some CUC stuff that's happening. So we have our official Huckin A resident fact checker Batch finally on the pod, and we couldn't be more excited. TL isn't necessarily a fact checker for us. She's just an awesome human being. But first, we're going to hear from our awesome sponsor, VC Ultimate. This episode has been brought to you by VC Ultimate. VC Ultimate is a company that proudly puts values and community before profit. VC is the world's best source for quality, design, and all of your ultimate needs.
Hey, this is Kelsey Hayden from Halifax Salty, and I'm a writer for Ultiworld. You're listening to the Huckin A podcast, your coast-to-coast guide for all things Canadian Ultimate.
Welcome, everybody, to our main event. We are very privileged to welcome Batch and TL to our podcast episode today. We're going to be talking about UCI and also some stuff about CUC. So before we dive into the questions, why don't you introduce yourselves to the Huckin A audience, and let's start with TL first.
Hello, everybody. I'm Teri-Lynne Belanger. Most of you would know me as TL. I spent the last 8 years working for Ultimate Canada, planning CUC and working on all of their national championships until COVID hit. And then, obviously, like all sports, we got hit pretty hard. And so I was laid off at the end of last year, but really excited to have been brought back on as a contractor to come and help execute the UCI events as well as University Nationals that's coming up.
Wonderful.
Okay, I'm Andrew Batchelor. You know me as Batch. I started playing Ultimate at Maryville High School in 1999. I retired from true competitive play in 2010 and haven't played any fun tournaments or league even at all since 2014. I joined the competition committee in 2009, became competition director in 2010, and I've only missed 3 CUCs since 2002, and 2 of those were after the split.
Wow.
That's really impressive. True veteran of the CUC there. So thanks, TL and Batch, for coming on. We're going to start with talking about UCI first. People listening, they're excited. They're either going to be following along online or actually playing it. So it's actually not that far away now, folks. So get prepared. So speaking of preparation here, how have you two been preparing? Because normally there's a CUC in 2 different locations, but now it's just 2 versions of the tournament in the same location. So, and also with COVID, some unique challenges. So, TL, let's start with you. How have you been preparing for UCI from your role in what you do?
Well, it's a little bit different for me this time because I was brought in a bit late, sort of after the fact, once a lot of the preparations were already done and a lot of the decisions were already made. Because I'm coming in as a contractor, I'm not doing quite as much of the pre-planning stuff that I normally would have done in my old role. So it's been a little bit, I guess, easier on my side because most of those really hard decisions have already been made. And so I'm just helping to execute with vendors and making sure that everything's ready to run, getting volunteers, making sure that I'm understanding exactly what they want to execute as far as COVID-19 policies go and what kinds of safety measures are being put in place and how that affects how we would normally have run a national event and how that changes. And so trying to sort of wrap my head around some of those changes and adapt.
No, sounds good. And Batch, I know draft, we were talking about this off air, but draft schedules have been sent out. And I guess by the time of this recording, they should hopefully be trying to answer and respond to you if they have issues with it. But what's that been like preparing the schedule? Some divisions a lot easier than others because some they got the 16, that's sweet, but some they got some odd numbers. So what's that been like?
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of challenges around making the schedules this year. I'd say at the beginning of June, I didn't think there was going to be any tournament, and then by the end of June, it's like we got to do something, and we've just been trying to make decisions on the fly so much faster than we ever have before. Like we gave teams a deadline to register, and then we promised to get them the number of teams down within a week, which was a crazy promise that was very difficult for us to execute. On the competition committee, there were lots of different opinions about what we should do, and that part of that's always a challenge when trying to rectify half the people want this and half the people want that. But so in terms of actually making the schedule, some of the divisions are simple, and I would say that mixed seniors was the most simple with 16 teams and no returning champion. So that one was reasonably easy to do. Everything else either had a backdoor final requirement or an uneven number of teams that made things challenging. Women's Masters obviously being the most challenging.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about the competition committee debate, or at least I knew that it was like basically tied for making a couple really key decisions, and I'm sure that would be pretty intense because at the end of the day, you want to allow people to play, but then there's world's bids and there's just like so many balls in the air that I'm sure you all are juggling. And first of all, thank you so that we can go play Frisbee. It's awesome. We love it. But yeah, those definitely seem like a lot of big challenges. Is there any other challenges for you, TL, other than kind of coming in late?
I think there's a couple on the logistics side. The first one was when I was brought on, the venue had been secured, which was great. So I knew that we had fields, but nothing else had been secured. And if you when you start to think about that and you go and you start to book tents and you think, okay, every restaurant in the city has rented a tent for their patio. Every wedding or funeral that is happening right now is happening outside under a tent. And so finding some of those things that we usually would be able to just call and rent and have no issues with became a bit of a challenge, where at one point I was looking into carports. I'm like, do I just buy a bunch of carports and put them all together? Like really having to think outside the box. We did end up managing to find a tent a little bit outside of the city. But again, like, you know, they held the fort for us for a short period of time. And then we're like, you need to sign because I got people calling. Like, so these things that weren't normally in demand were in demand now. And I think the other thing that's been challenging, and I think it's been challenging for everybody, but, when planning an event, has been the constant changing of the rules and public health guidelines. And we have to go by public health guidelines that are happening in Ontario, but not even just in Ontario, but in Ottawa. And so keeping up with those, because those seem to change very quickly, and trying to make sure that we're going to be able to communicate that across the country, because what's happening in Ontario is not what's happening in Alberta, is not what's happening in BC. And so to wrap your head around how things work here can be quite challenging, I think, for some of the players coming. So how do we make sure that we communicate that? Because by the time certainly the senior event runs, like vaccine passports will be in place in Ontario. So teams coming from BC or coming from Alberta that don't have a vaccine passport need to understand they will not be able to eat inside a restaurant without having their full vaccination record with them. And so that's been a bit challenging to try and keep up with all of those changes and try and keep up with what the requirements are going to be so that we don't have teams coming in not knowing what to expect when they arrive.
And TL, you brought up a point that now I'm just thinking of, like, that I want to ask, which is, are you able to say what are kind of the main questions that people have been asking you? Because I'm sure you, Batch, Danie, you've all been inundated with emails constantly about the tournament. So what are some of the major questions people have? Is it mostly about COVID safety or some other things that they've been asking about?
I haven't gotten a lot of questions about COVID safety, and I think a lot of teams have sort of already got their own internal set of rules that they're playing by and that they've created their roster by that probably are even more strict than a lot of the public health guidelines. So I think for the most part, that hasn't been a lot of the questions. Most of the questions that I feel that have been around the schedule and have been around what the uniform requirements are going to be, because everyone wants to know if they're going to have to do uniforms. And then I just get forward those on to Batch and say, you need to answer these. They're looking for information from you. But, I'm trying always on the logistics side to preempt the questions that people went, oh my gosh, I didn't think to ask that. And now I'm here and I need to know, and trying to make sure that I get that information to them, because their focus tends to be more on the play and not necessarily on all the logistics that are going on around the play.
So, Batch, are you going to now tell us, or maybe you've answered these questions about the uniforms, but could you tell the Huckin A audience, in case they didn't email you, what the uniform requirements are?
Yeah, I can answer that. I'd say the most common question I get about uniforms is about numbers and teams saying that they don't have enough time to order jerseys with numbers. And my answer to that is that you don't need to order new jerseys this year. You can wear any set of lights and any darks. They don't need to match your teammates, but they should have a number that is unique to that person. So that's sort of the advice I give. And I also follow up that a response with more elaboration in that uniform violations are dealt with on a complaint basis. So if nobody complains to me about your uniforms, there's not going to be any consequences. And that means you don't want observers complaining, you don't want scorekeepers complaining, you don't want media complaining. So if it's very likely we're not going to have scorekeepers and the media presence is going to be much smaller. So those sources of complaints are going to be diminished. So if you get a card from an observer, go tell them what number you are in the system instead of having them try to find it on your jersey, and you're going to be fine.
This is why you both are on the podcast, giving us real life tips to how to navigate UCI. So, Batch or TL, can one of you answer this as well? Because I know in the first initial website or talking about it, we weren't sure if there'd be a live stream. So are we able to confirm that at all for those that maybe can attend UCI, that they could still get in on the action by watching it? So what's the live stream situation, especially for both divisions there?
I think our hope and our goal is to be able to live stream at least some games at both events, especially recognizing that we do have numbers caps on the site. So the ability to have spectators will be little to none. There will be very few exceptions made to having spectators on the field, and those will be on very strict circumstances that we would allow somebody who's not actually playing to be on site. And so knowing that, we won't be able to have people there physically watching, we've put a little bit more emphasis on trying to get some live stream up and running. And our hope is to be able to do that for both events.
That's awesome. I didn't actually know that there was going to be potentially a live stream. That's really cool to find out. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
What are you both most looking forward to? Like, it's day one, you're on the fields, teams are warming up. What part of the tournament really brings you both the most joy?
I'll go first, and I'll say that blowing the air horn to start the first games on Saturday mornings, when I get to do that, that'll be a good kick for me. I'm going to really enjoy that.
I think I've been a little bit lucky in that I was involved with the junior program here in Ottawa this summer, and we actually we got invited to go and play at the Quebec Provincial Championships. They actually ran a provincial championships. And so it was our first tournament really back since COVID. And to get to stand there during that sort of half hour before games start, when warm-ups are all happening and you see everybody running their drills and getting ready for play. And there was just something really nostalgic and really comforting about that. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing that again at the national level. And I think for me, I worked for OQA before I worked for Ultimate Canada. And to see that happening at UPI, it really is a very special place. And so to have that be sort of the first place that we get to go back and play that national championships and getting to stand on the rise and sort of watch that start again, I think is going to probably bring a couple of tears to my eyes, to be honest.
Yeah, speaking of your juniors players, one of your Wicked West players was actually at the U20 prospect camp that I was doing this weekend. And she played awesome. Emily Marshall, shout out to you for crushing it today. And yeah, for you all for crushing it in Ottawa. Your players are doing so well.
Thank you.
Now, Theo, I know you want to ask kind of a more spicy question. You always do.
Always. So when we first, I think we did, maybe this was after our emergency podcast, Danie, when we talked about like predictions and stuff, early predictions. But now we're close to the event. We're seeing rosters come in. So now I'm going to put TL and Batch on the spot here. Give us some predictions for the event. It might not have to be like, obviously not game by game, but like maybe some teams you think are going to do well or teams you think are going to surprise. I don't know. Any takes, we'll have them on the podcast. So I don't know who wants to start.
As competition director, I think it'd be pretty inappropriate to actually pick teams to win games. But I will make a couple predictions, and I predict that at least one score reported will be flipped. Somebody's going to report a score that they lost a game, but they actually won, or vice versa. I also predict that there'll be a good number of missing scores and spirit sheets that I'll have to go chase after.
Yeah.
And one more prediction is some teams will be disappointed in their performances, and some teams are going to be thrilled to exceed expectations.
Well, that last one is really groundbreaking.
Yeah, spicy takes from Batch right there. But I understand your position, Batch. So we do appreciate that you're not compromising your position as competition director, picking games. So maybe TL, you could offer something, for us. Or maybe we just have to do it, Danie. So
Yeah. I actually do. I think that this is going to be a really exciting national event. I think that everybody is going to be coming from a very different place than they ever have before coming to play. And so I just think we have some opportunities to get to see some really exciting games. And I think it actually makes it really hard to predict who's going to win. Usually we go into a CUC with lots of stats and lots of understanding as to how teams have been playing. And we don't have that this time. And I think that makes for an even more exciting tournament because I feel like, that every game is up for grabs. And, I just think that's going to be really exciting. I will say that I predict that we will probably have some snow, that we will probably have some rain, that we will probably have some sun, and that every BC player is going to be grossly underdressed.
Excuse me, did you just say snow?
Yeah.
Wait, snow, really?
Yeah.
October, yeah.
Yeah. I'll give a shout out to Kevin Underhill, who showed up at a University Nationals, which is at this time of year in Montreal, with his little windbreaker on. And I thought, oh my goodness, you are going to freeze. And freeze he did because we had snow and rain and wind. And BC players don't understand what the weather is like here in Ontario at the end of September, beginning of October. So,
It's
if
still hot
any
here.
BC players are watching this, layering is the key. Lots and lots of layers.
Yeah, because 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago? 1 year ago. I don't know. Yeah, 2 years ago when there was tryouts in Ottawa for World Masters, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be cold. It's going to be cold. And I was in a t-shirt the whole time. It was stunning. And I think it was mid to late October. So I guess it's what you're saying is by saying layers, it can be unpredictable. Correct?
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean,
well, even thinking about that windy tournament you're talking about, or those kind of weather conditions. What about Alberta? In 20, did you play that tournament, Danie, in 2019?
I loved that day.
I heard the
windy
second
day was my favorite.
I heard the second day was unplayable.
No, it wasn't.
It was unplayable.
If you're a handler with good wrist snap, it's so fun. It was so fun.
So I guess, Danie, we're going to have to do some more takes next week when we do our predictions. And we will predict games. We will predict games for you. I know Batch and TL, you got your priorities with what you do for Ultimate Canada, so we don't want to jeopardize that, of course. But now we're going to flip in and talk about the tournament that we know as CUC. I know some people call UCI CUC, so I try to correct them even on the podcast. So CUC, our beloved tournament. TL, for you first, which is the first one you've attended? And then Batch, you're going to answer.
So first, I want to thank you for correcting people because I do want to make sure that people coming out know that this is not CUC. And from someone who's planned many CUCs, the experience is not going to be what you remember it as being CUC, which is, I think, a big reason why the name change needed to happen, because the expectations really do need to be set differently from what CUC is, so that when we bring CUC back, you can come back knowing that that's what you're going to expect. So my first CUC that I ever attended was actually 1999 here in Ottawa. I had never even heard of Ultimate before. A family member of ours was playing. He was playing on 666, which was the junior team from North Bay, Ottawa. And we went out to watch this crazy sport. It was going to be so exciting. and headed out to UPI. It was the first nationals that UPI held, and that was my first time at a CUC and my first exposure to the sport, really. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I've never heard of that name before, so that's pretty cool. You know, you learn something new every day. So, Batch, what about you?
The first CUC I attended, excuse me, was at UPI, but it was 2002, and I got on the roster for Too Bad, and I didn't play a single point. I think their coach captain saw my throws in warm up and decided I had no spot on his team, and I didn't play a single point all tournament. I went to the site every day, and I just wandered the fields and watched some good ultimate.
Wait, you were like on the roster?
That's kind of sad.
Yes, I was rostered as a pickup player and a sight unseen by the coach captain through a reference of a player on another team, and I didn't see the field.
Oh my gosh, that seems excessive. But was there no communication? Did they tell you that they weren't going to play you? Not at first.
It was not communicated that way at all. In fact, there wasn't any communication between me and that captain until Thursday morning when I showed up at the fields to play on his team that I had been rostered on.
Well, playing on his team is a loose term, I guess.
Yeah.
To be rostered. Yeah, warmed up. All right. Well, yeah. I'm sorry about that experience. I've definitely played on teams where I don't play much, but I'm still on the field. So,
but not at all. Like that's very different.
That seems excessive. Yeah, still sticking with the CUC. I know both you say that UPI was your first experience. So let's say aside from UPI, what is your favorite CUC location? And I know that sometimes it's like held in the same places frequently, but there's been some exciting one-offs. So let's start with Batch.
Okay, so speaking as a competition director, my favorite place to have CUC is Brampton. Like, UPI does not compare to Brampton. There's just so many more fields. The fields are large. They have full sidelines, extra restraining lines. We have 2 turf fields. We have lightning shelters. We have an office. It is an excellent, excellent site. And there's a splash pad. Like, come on.
There you go.
TL, your turn.
For me, I don't know if ditto is, but I would definitely say logistically for me, Brampton as well, for all the same reasons that Batch listed, but I'll take it a step further. The community support in Brampton is phenomenal. I would say the only other community that would be on par with the support that we get would be Edmonton. And I'd say their fields are not that far off. They don't have quite the indoor space. Like, we have indoor washrooms in Brampton. That alone is pretty phenomenal. But just having the capacity to be able to have so many fields at our fingertips and to be able to move things around if weather, rears its ugly head, and having indoor space and then, like I said, the support of Brampton tourism and the community, they're so wanting to engage with us and wanting to support our event coming to their community. And, as much as it's not downtown Toronto, it's really close to Pearson, so it makes it really accessible for teams across the country, which is another really key thing about being there as well. So it just has a lot of really great things going for it from a planning perspective. And so if any other community is out there and wants to get 28 fields in one location with a splash pad and turf fields and lights, then we'll happily consider you as our next best location.
There you have it. You can bid to be the next CUC location when it's back better than ever. So I know I've been to Brampton a couple times for those national events, even at University Nationals as well. So it's definitely a cool place. I know not the city everyone wants to visit, but logistically it was great, especially taking the golf cart out and buzzing around the field. So that was a good time there. And now, I will confess to the audience, I'm not a big partier, okay? So I'm not a big party guy. I know maybe people think I'm a fun guy, so I would do that, but I'm not a big partier. But Batch and TL, on the other hand, Danie, big partiers. They love wild. The CUC parties. They get wild. But we're going to keep it G-rated, of course. But favorite CUC party, maybe the theme that you had for that party as well. So TL, we're going to start with you this time.
So I have a tie between two. The first one was 2006 Halifax. It was actually held at the fort right downtown. Like they actually got the grounds of the fort and put a massive tent and DJ, and it was just it was crazy to me that they allowed a bunch of Ultimate players to go and party up there, and so that was pretty cool. And then really from a fun perspective, I probably had the most fun at the 2019 Edmonton party. It was a 90s theme, so the music was pretty up my alley, and it was just the size of the venue was right for our group, and the music was good, and the drinks were good, and it was just a really fun night. So those two are sort of one for the venue, the other for the atmosphere.
And just to elaborate on Teri-Lynne's 2006 in Halifax, that party at the Citadel in Halifax is the reason that the party budget was slashed for all future tournaments, because it was such an expensive party that we can't do that again. It was you can't justify spending Ultimate players' money on that elaborate of a party. But I heard it was great. I couldn't go that year because I was chaperoning juniors, so I missed out on what was the best. What a lot of people consider to be the best party.
Yeah.
So for me, I've got two. The first one is 2003. That was in Montreal, where we rented it's also a fort type building on top of Mount Royal in the middle of downtown, with this huge scenic lookout at this giant dance floor. There's building, and the drinks were cheap. It was so great. I just remember at the end of the night, like, people had so many drink tickets left over, they were giving them away for free, and it was fantastic. And getting home afterwards, like, just basically sliding through a forest down the steep side of the hill to get to our hotel. That, like, we could see from the party, we could see our hotel, and we decided we don't want to take the shuttle all the way around the back. We're going to walk down the hill in the dark after lots of drinks. That was very memorable. But and that one is tied with 2011, which was in Ottawa at the Art Museum, where I met my wife that night. So that's why that one's right there.
That's so cute. Okay, we need to...
Come on, that was good.
Theo, we have a document going, and I was, without him even saying so, going to say my favorite locations too, but he was like, Danie, say yours, and I'm like bursting at the seams. But first, Batch, tell us how you met your wife.
Okay. I was at CUC 2011. I was competition director, and a friend of mine had come down from Montreal to be a volunteer at that tournament. And her role had become to sort of be the observers liaison and sort of the runner for the observers to go get them snacks and stuff like that and report the scores and all those things. And my wife was an observer. And my wife said to my friend that after I was doing something with sort of authority, she said, "Oh, that Batch is cute." And then my friend Brenda said to my wife Ellen, "And he's single." And so Brenda made sure that we got to talk to each other at the party that night, and that's how we met.
That's so cute. Okay. Thank you for sharing about your love life on our podcast. That's wonderful. I was going to say that Ottawa was in my top as well, because it was just my first CUCs. And I just remember like being in awe of where we were partying, and felt like it was almost like, why are all these dirty Ultimate players dancing to Backstreet Boys without shirts on in this museum? It just felt like it was like the right kind of wild. I liked it. And then my next favorite was, I think it was Vancouver with the ball pit. Was that Vancouver? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was pretty fun. Yeah. And it's hard to, I was living in Victoria at the time when the one was in Victoria, and I really enjoyed that one too, just because it was local and homegrown. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard. The 90s one, I didn't make it to TL, so I think I would have liked that one.
Yeah, it was fun.
I couldn't quite make it out.
I'll give a shout out to Craig Kulik, who was the one that organized that ball pit. And he was so proud of that ball pit. Yeah, he was so proud. He was so excited, telling me about it the whole day during the day before, and was just so stoked about that ball pit. And then when it went over as well as it did, I think he was just really, really happy. So
Man had vision. Like, that was incredible to pull something like that off. So yeah, I mean, obviously remembered it. So yeah, that's an amazing thing to have at an event. Like, what other sport national tournament has a ball pit? Like, come on. So
that wasn't the first ball pit at a CUC, but it
No
was
way.
a far more impressive ball pit. The one at 2008 Calgary was there was a ball pit at 2008 party in Calgary, and it was not as impressive as the one in Vancouver.
Wow. Maybe it's a theme in Ultimate. We should do that again at UCI. That's COVID friendly, right? Everybody diving into the same place. I think it sounds pretty good. So we're kind of talking about crazy things, crazy times. Can you both speak to anything else, maybe organizationally, whether that has happened over the years that you could deem to be crazy? And we'll start with TL.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the craziest game I saw was the mixed final in 2011, where Odyssey was really dominating the game over TFP up until the lightning call. And then we had a weather delay. And I don't know what happened during that weather delay. But when they came back to play, TFP just took over. And I often sort of wonder, like, what that game would have ended like had we not had a weather call. I think, that when you have something like that really just changes the course of a game, I always find that fascinating and interesting and kind of mind-boggling. So, and it always speaks to, when you're talking to players and teams about mental toughness and being able to, have things disrupt your flow. How do you get that flow back? And I think that's just something that's always fascinating to me. But without a doubt, the CUC that has given me the most things to talk about in an interview, the most things to reference when I want to show how creative I've been, as CUC 2017. I don't know if you guys were there, but, a lot of times we talk about weather during the event, but really that was about the weather that was in Ottawa for the entire summer. It was the rainiest summer on record in Ottawa. And so before we even took to the fields were mushy, and there was a lake down at UPI too that we actually built a bridge over so that players could get there. And having to abandon site completely on the Friday in order and go to 3 separate sites in order for us to be able to allow games to continue instead of just canceling games, which would have been completely understandable given the conditions of the field, was just certainly one of the things that if you had said to me a year before, this is what you're going to be doing with CUC next year, I would have told you that's crazy. You can't do that. Like, that would be insane to try and do that. And yet we did. So that's certainly, very little sleep. Lots and lots and lots of work, but totally worth it for just the references that I've been able to make to it since then.
Yeah, I remember being there with Vortex. I was coaching Vortex, and we were downtown Ottawa, and it was literally the hardest I've ever been rained on, ever. Like, it doesn't rain like that in Vancouver. It rains a lot in Vancouver, but not like that big of rain. So it was pretty impressive. So big shout out to you for being able to like Houdini that whole tournament, make sure that it still went off. I mean, from my stand, like without a hitch, it seemed to go really, really well. So big congrats to you. And Batch, what about you?
So I could talk about a trio of unbelievable comebacks, like including the one that TL talked about, or I could talk about some really bad on-field decisions or even some blatant cheating. But I think the craziest thing that I've seen at CUC was in 2014 when a Maverick player came up to me and wanted to disqualify Grand Trunk for a uniform violation. And I asked this player if the uniform was so different that he couldn't tell which team the player was on. And he meekly said to me, yes. And I said, okay, let's go and take a look. And I walk over to the field at Rim Park in Waterloo, and I'm trying to find this Grand Trunk player that doesn't match the rest of his team. And because they all look like they're wearing navy blue shirts to me. And he points the guy out to me, and he's got a slightly different elephant logo on the front of his jersey than everybody else on his team. And this guy, like I say, I'm not changing the game for this. No, stop bothering me. I'm going back to work.
Was that just like the last tool in the tool belt to try to get a win against them?
I think he thought that there's no way they were going to come back and win this game, and maybe a disqualification would change the result. I talked to some other captains who I was more friendly with on the team afterwards, and they had no idea he had done this, and they disowned this action, saying, this is ridiculous. No, we're not that team.
Wow, that's pretty wild.
I mean, Batch, I'll be honest, when you started listing off the things you could talk about, I mean, I like that story, but I want to know the other stories that you were referencing that you said you could have talked about. Are you able to share those, or is that like...
I can talk about any of them. I don't know how long you have, but I could go on for a while.
Batch, I just want to hear the crazy comebacks if possible. And, I mean, the cheating stuff, you're going to be calling out teams. I don't know if you want to do that, so I'll leave the ball in your court for that, Batch.
Okay, so the other two comebacks that I wanted to shout out that TL didn't already mention is 2003 in the women's final in Montreal's Molson Stadium. Stella took half 8-2, and Prime came back to win at hard cap 9-8. It was a slow game with tons of calls, and Stella just needed to score 1 point so many times, and Prime just didn't let them score and came back and won 9-8. That one is ingrained. That was the first CUC that I played at. I was at 2002, but 2003 was the first one I played at, and I was seeing what the finals looked like, and it was intense. The other comeback I wanted to talk about was 2012, and that's Victoria, where Furious came to the tournament with only 14 players and ran lines so efficiently that they got to the finals against General Strike. And General Strike seemed to have their number the whole game until they were within 1 point of winning, and Furious just said no and went on a run to win the game. It was the finish to that game was crazy because it just seemed like General Strike was just there, just one more little thing, and they never got there, and Furious won.
I remember that game. I was playing Sky Shark, so I was like lower ranked mixed team, and was like watching this like huge comeback. And I remember at the party, all the Strike guys were just like heads down the whole time. It was very memorable to me that like it seemed like Furious was invincible. Like even when against all odds, they still ended up winning back then. So yeah, that one really stuck out to me. And also, what about the juniors game? I feel like there was that game with Toro versus Alpha back in the day where
2015
Alpha just or Toro stormed back and ended up like scoring on a tipped block layout to score to win. Like that was insane too. I just love this tournament.
I don't work with the juniors anymore. I haven't worked with the junior part of the tournament since 2012 I did. Still had juniors. 2015 had separated the juniors to earlier in the week. So, and I don't, the development committee looks after junior tournaments and I look after senior and masters.
Got it.
So I did see that tip point because I had showed up a little early before my tournament started the next day, but I didn't see the whole game.
Yeah, it's too bad because the game is lost in the archives. I've tried to look for it, but there are only highlights available. But the whole game would be great to watch once again.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that I don't get to watch a lot of games at these tournaments. It's basically just finals. I'm running around all week looking for missing score sheets and tracking down all kinds of disciplinary actions. The finals are the only time I get to sit down and actually watch a game. So those are pretty much the only ones I see.
So if you are listening to this and you are in charge of submitting scores, this man wants to watch some Frisbee. So give him the gift that he deserves and send in your darn scores on time.
Yeah. And then, Theo, if you want to hear about the cheating, I'll do it without naming names. But I think people will know who I'm talking about if they were there. And in a quarterfinal game in 2010, it was Universe Point, and a player on a team refused to let the other team complete a pass without calling a travel or a foul or a violation because he was just cheating. Like even with the observers on site, it always just came back to thrower regardless of the ruling the observers had, because a violation just changes the stall count and it happens before the disc is up. So he just incessantly called these things until a turnover happened, and they went down and scored to win their quarterfinal on Universe Point because of that, and that'll always stick in my mind. And then, so yeah, if I go into any more details, it might give too much away.
We know it's a men's team, so
there's
it could be mixed.
Men on the team.
Oh, okay.
See, it could have been mixed. Oh, now I gotta just like poke around and try to find this answer here.
We'll do some sleuthing for sure.
We won't shame them, of course. We won't do that. But that is a good reminder, because we haven't been playing for a while, to play within the confines of the rules. Is that what you're saying, Batch?
Yeah.
Remember why we play. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, otherwise I'm going to remember who you are.
And talk about you on a podcast. And name names next time. Okay. What? Exactly. I know we said kind of most exciting things or craziest things. Is that the same category as your favorite games? Do either of you have a game that's a favorite that's different than those kind of crazy comebacks? Okay, Batch, you're nodding your head, so you're going to start.
Definitely. So the finals in 2015 were, with an exception, fantastic. All 4 of the 5, I loved watching every single bit of it. But the one that really sticks out to me is the women's final in 2015, Iris versus Traffic. That game was back and forth all game, and I never knew who was going to win. I thought both teams played to the absolute peaks of their abilities and left it all on the field. And it's always going to be right. Like, it's always the first one I think of when people ask me, what game would you want to watch again? It's that one.
I was actually on Traffic that year, technically. Didn't see the field in that game per se, but it was a really good game. I got a front row seat, so yeah. It was a good game. And TL, how about you?
My favorite game, I much like Batch, I don't get to watch a whole lot other than the finals, so I really don't get to see very much. But mine is probably, for different reasons than Batch, would be Sixers Traffic in Ottawa in 2017. And that was mostly because there was a goldfish on the line, and I had obviously picked Sixers, and the person that I had bet the goldfish with had bet on Traffic, and so I was really, really pulling for Sixers, and it was looking like Traffic was going to come away with it, and then Sixers came out in the end. So it meant I didn't have to take care of a goldfish at the end. So, but without a doubt for me, I always love watching the women's final. I find just the women's game so exciting, and so it's not a surprise to me that Batch and I have both enjoyed 2 women's finals in the last 6 years as being sort of the highlight, because it was a great game anyways, even without the goldfish. It was an awesome game to watch.
Yeah, it's funny that you picked that game, because Theo and I have already prepped and primed one of our Canadian Classic episodes, and it is that game. And we have Laura Mason and Lauren Kimura coming on the podcast to kind of break down what was happening on both sides, because it was such an exciting game. Like, both of the games that you've mentioned were awesome. So we agree. We are going to be totally hyping up that entire game, probably in a month or two, once all of their actual tournaments have calmed down a little bit. So
yeah, something to look forward to. But to summarize it all, you've given us your time, and we do appreciate that. We're going to summarize it all right now. We talked about parties, we talked about games, talked about cheating, talked about all that
marriage,
stuff.
Love.
So now, marriage too. So now you got to summarize your favorite CUC of all time. Okay, I know it's going to be tough. But TL, you're going to go first. Tell us your favorite CUC, and give us your reason why.
I'm probably going to say that my favorite CUC was 2018. It was our first time in Brampton. And it was the first time that Ultimate Canada really took the lead in running CUC. Traditionally, we had always had a local organizing committee that took the lead, and we sort of were there as a support and sort of as guidance to make sure that, our minimum standards were being met. But in 2018, we actually took the lead. We put together our own events team, and we're really able to have a bit more control over how the event unfolded. And I think that a lot of the things that we had put in place from 2013 until that point sort of peaked in that 2018 CUC. So, one of my favorite things of CUC is the junior showcase game on the Sunday night after opening ceremonies. We started doing opening ceremonies in 2015. It was started as, we did it in the morning on the Monday because everybody was already there, and we wanted to sort of create this opening ceremonies and get this buy-in, and it takes a little while for that to happen. In 2017, we had our very first opening ceremonies on the Sunday with the showcase game. And so by the time we got to 2018, we had sort of had this little, this event that had grown quite a bit over the 5 years since juniors had split from the adult division. And so being able to sort of bring in our own team and have all of those things peak at the right time, I think that just made it sort of my favorite CUC.
Batch.
Yeah, so for me, I broke this into two categories. First, as a player, my favorite CUC was 2010. That was my last one as a player, where my team made it to the finals. We lost, but that was the furthest I've ever made it at CUC, and it was a fantastic experience. We'd spent all summer building to that point, and we had done it properly, and we really came together at CUC. It was a fantastic experience as a player. But as a director, I think that's a completely other thing that I take out of a CUC than as a player. So with honorable mentions to 2015, 2018 single gender that Teri-Lynne talked about, and both in 2019, my favorite CUC is probably 2011. And that was the first time I was competition director. The weather was great, except for that mixed final. The fields were great. The party was great. The competition was great. The local organizing committee was great. There was tons of volunteers. We were doing live tweeting of scores for the first time. It was superbly run. They'd put so much effort into planning it. They thought of pretty much everything except for lightning in the finals. And it was definitely my favorite CUC as a competition director.
Wow. I mean, lots of memories here. You've been to many more CUCs than I have, and maybe Danie and I combined. I think you two have been to many more than us, but we hope to see you all, the audience, at UCI coming up. And thanks, TL and Batch, for coming on and just sharing about the prep that you've done for it, all the countless hours you've put in, and also your teams that you're a part of, the organizing committee. So thank you for doing that, and we appreciate you coming in on the show. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
We'll take a quick break and be right back on the Huckin A podcast. We're back, Huckin A podcast. We just heard from, as you mentioned before the break there, resident fact checker Andrew Batchelor, Teri-Lynne Belanger. Good conversation. What was your main takeaway there, Danie? I got some thoughts, but I'll let you go first.
My main takeaway is that for all of you that are just listening or watching, we stayed on afterwards and we just couldn't stop talking to them about CUCs and UCI stuff. So we could have really made this episode 3 hours long. They both have so much to share. So that's a takeaway. Another takeaway I have is I think about so much of CUCs from the perspective of myself, of course. And it's funny that my favorite parties, my favorite CUCs are not the same as the people who are organizing them. And I don't know why that ever really came into my brain before, that of course they like Brampton. It just must be so much easier, must be so much smoother. From their perspective, it's awesome. And I totally get it. So that's a takeaway for me. How about you?
For me, it's the logistical side, as you were talking about, but even TL talking about getting tents and you take it for granted. Oh, there's tents there, food tent. Oh, okay, cool. They shade us from the sun and protect it from the rain. That's great. But that's got to come from somewhere. So the fact that those things are happening and being taken care of is pretty cool. And the schedule too, with odd teams, that can be a big mess. So Batch, first of all, thank you for fact checking us. But second of all, thank you for doing the schedules, because someone has to do it. You've taken the role. It is a role that is very important And lots of people, me included, right? We care about the schedule. I think that's like probably, is that an ultimate thing you think, Danny? Because a lot of people just care about the schedule. They want to know what the schedule coming out. At least I do. I want to know which teams are playing in what order and stuff. So maybe that's just me. I don't know if you think about that.
No, I think anytime I'm playing a sport, I'm obsessed with who I'm playing and where they're seated. And yeah, it's not just an ultimate thing. It's a sports thing. It's a competitor thing.
Yeah. So that's kind of our thoughts for UCI prep. But next week we got some big news because UCI, you're just knocking around the corner. Let's go.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for tuning in. As always, we love you all. Next week, we are going to be previewing UCI Masters as well as the university tournaments across Canada. Whether they're happening or not, where they're happening, who's participating, we're going to give you the full lowdown.
Yeah, Masters preview. We're going to get the bets going. I think you beat me so far with the predictions for nationals early on, so I got to make it back here.
And also AUDL Canada Cup.
Oh yeah, that too. So I'm in all types. I didn't bet, but you picked the right team, so I'm in all types of trouble there. So we got to figure that out. But subscriber only, you can tune into that. You get to hear Danny's favorite party memories. We're not going to spoil what that is, but you got to be a subscriber to listen to it. I'm going to share my favorite CUC. I've only played 3. I'll share my favorite one. Hop on a subscriber only for that. We're over 500 followers on Instagram. That's amazing. Help us get to 600. Go subscribe to Ultiworld. Less than, $5 a month US, $15 Canadian. It's all good. So we'll see you next week.
Hey friends, this is Morgan Hibbert from Vancouver Furious George and Team Canada, and you're listening to the Huckin podcast, your coast-to-coast guide for all things Canadian.